Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay.
Welcome to Pit Lane Parlay. My name is host Mike Jokum. We are here for a special Rolex 24 recap. First guest of the show is Kyle Tilley, owner and driver for the LMP2 era Motorsports podium finisher. Kyle, first off, thanks for joining. How you feeling a week after the longest race of the season?
I'm still a little sore, if I'm honest, but still on a high.
Yeah, congratulations! You guys had a great race. Your background is super interesting. For those who don't know, you did some Pirelli World Challenge racing amongst other things when you came over to the U.S. in 2013, but you founded Era Motorsports, which actually focused on driver development for vintage and historic racing. So tell me how you went from focusing on vintage and historic racing, which we were just talking about before we recorded, to, hey, let me enter the Rolex 24 in the 2020 IMSA season.
Okay, so I first of all, I've been fortunate enough to race professionally for the last kind of 8 to 10 years. After the year we did in PwC with the Aston Martin, I was a little, to say jaded with the pro racing and the driver ranking side of things is not quite accurate, but something along those lines. I was doing more and more driver coaching work with gentlemen with historic race cars. One of my very first clients had a Formula 5000, which he was intent on me driving. And I was really not very keen on driving it because you started looking around it and you're like, oh, when was that last crack check? Et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I've kind of mentioned those to him, and he said to me, well, you should set up your own prep shop. And I did. So we went from having one single car trailer to having now like 4 semi-trucks, 30 cars in the workshop. And it's just grown exponentially, which has been great. And then we were working with one of my clients. He's got a Nissan MPT90 GTP car. We put him in an LMPC car at Monterey last year, 2019, and he loved it. And so one of my engineers kind of jokingly said, well, if you love that, we should do Daytona with a P2 car. And that kind of triggered something in his mind. And he was like, yeah, let's go and do that. And that's how this whole crazy journey started.
I love it. So speaking of that first Daytona race, you finished third. How proud are you of, not only yourself, but the entire team to, come home in an extremely tough race with a 8-hour green flag stint and come home on the podium in your class?
Yeah, I've never been in tears after a race before, but that one was definitely an emotional one for me. Not just from a driver standpoint, but the amount of work that went in. I mean, we only started this program 7 weeks ago at this point. So to have such a fault-free, flawless race, we didn't have any contact, no issues with the pits, no car issues. The guys just knocked it out of the park. So I can't speak highly enough of the group we've assembled, and I'm looking forward to Sebring.
Yeah, I think you guys are in line for another fantastic event. So the one thing I'm curious about, coming together in such a short period of time, how do you prepare for a 24-hour event? Was there anybody you leaned on, went to for advice? I know you did some work with the Pit Fit training guys in Indianapolis. And I did read at one point you guys were possibly getting some help from the Dragon Speed team. I don't know if that continued on or not.
No, that didn't continue on. We were 2 separate entities come the Raw. In terms of who we leaned on, I put in place Ross Needham as team manager, who joined us from Core in Porsche. And then guys like our engineer, Scott Best. We took on Jeff Brown, who is now our competition director. Those guys, the experience they have and the mechanics that we have, who they'd all worked extensively with the Oracle 07 previously. So that combination, we were just able to hit the ground running come race week.
Yeah, you guys did a great job all around. So you're the owner and you're the driver. Is there extra stress involved when you are both the owner and the driver?
Yes and no is the honest answer to that. As previously said, with the guys that we have in place, I actually don't really focus on running the team too much at all. I'm just able to focus on my driving. So without them, then it would be a massive amount of extra stress. I mean, for example, at Daytona, I didn't focus once on anything team management, team owner related. I was just able to concentrate on driving and have the boys look after the management side of it. But obviously now the race is over, I'm back taking care of a few things. But on the whole, it's relatively self-sufficient, and I can just concentrate on the driving side of things.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to handle it. I guess I probably know the answer to my next question at this point, but so that means you were probably able to get some rest in between stints instead of overstressing about things.
Yeah, that was where having Jim Leo from PitFit really came in handy at the race, because he was able to work with us on massage, on recovery, and just winding down after a stint to allow us to get some sleep. Because otherwise, I've done 24-hour races before where I've been so amped up I haven't been able to sleep. So this one I actually managed to get, I think it was 4 hours total, which was a lot more than the crew guys got. But it was still, when the alarm went off to get in the car at like 5 a.m. on the Sunday, I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, that's about 2.5 hours more sleep than I got sitting in the media center office chair, which was pretty rough when I got to the airport Sunday night. So
I bet.
Yeah. That next year, Jess and I did mention we are going to find a better way to prepare ourselves instead of kind of struggling through the last 8 hours of the event. To me, were a complete blur because I was exhausted. So overall, between the Roar, qualifying, your first Rolex 24, what was the experience like? What are you going to look back on positively as some good memories?
For me, my favorite part of it, I ended up doing 10 stints in total. And for me, my favorite part of it was the sunrise stint. When I got in, it was dark and the sun came up, and that was a special one. You're like, all right, cool. We're doing Daytona 24 in an LMP2 car of my own team. So that's one I'll always remember. And then just the sheer expression of joy from all of the crew guys and everybody involved when we crossed the line third. It was a special moment, that one.
So when the race ends and the podium celebration ends and the champagne is done, do you guys actually just kind of pass out of sheer exhaustion at that point, or are you so amped up that it's just a normal day until it's time to pass out in the evening?
No, I passed out. We went to the podium, and by the time the podium was done and we'd had a glass or two of champagne, I passed out for kind of 3-4 hours. And then as a team, some of us went for dinner. Not all of us were able to wake up. So some of us went for dinner and had a few drinks, and then we passed out again. So it wasn't the party that everybody thinks it might be.
Yeah, I was very curious of that as I slept on the floor of the Orlando airport to try to recover before I had to fly home.
Right.
So you're doing the full IMSA season. What are your expectations in your first IMSA season in the LMP2 category?
Good question. For me, the Truman Aiken Award for Dwight, my co-driver, is a big importance and a focus. Maximizing points for the NAEC would be great, but honestly, if we can come away with a victory in any of the races, and I think probably Road America is where we're going to be really competitive. That's the goal. But I guess ultimately the goal is just to be competitive and give a good account of ourselves and the business.
So if you're looking before Daytona and you don't really know what to expect, and you're looking now, wow, we got a podium in our first event, does that raise your expectations from a week ago at this time?
Yeah, I think we thought a podium might be on, but that was like a lot. We thought it would be a stretch, but we thought it was possibly doable. I guess now we set the bar pretty high for the rest of the season, haven't we? But going forward, yeah, victories would be nice. And if we can stay consistently on the podium, I think we'll be delighted.
I love it. So I'll wrap it up here with one kind of non-IMSA based question. Looking at your racing background, you've been in a lot of different type of cars in the vintage and historics. So your favorite race car that you've driven, and then one that you'd love to drive.
All right, that's relatively easy. Right now, my favorite race car is the Orica. But I spend a lot of time in historic Formula One, and I love those cars. Definitely don't want to have an accident in one. But in terms of an enjoyable car to drive, they tick all the boxes. You can slide them around. They make the best noise. And yeah, they're just seriously cool race cars. But the current Orica, I've said to everybody, is by far the easiest race car I've ever driven. And that goes from when I started racing go-karts at 6 up through Formula Ford, Formula 3 and into GTs. The Orica is just so easy to drive. The guys in France did a killer job designing and putting that one together. But in terms of if I could drive one car, it would be any of the late 90s GT1 cars. So the McLaren F1 GTR Longtail, the Mercedes CLK GTR, or the late 90s, like 98, 99 Porsche 911 GT1.
That's a really good answer. All right. So
if any of your listeners have one, that would be great.
Yeah, if anybody out there has one, Kyle and I would both love to drive it. So please make that. Same question, but racetracks. One track you've driven at that you maybe is your favorite or you had a great experience at. I guess maybe you could start with Daytona. And then one that you haven't driven at that you would love to drive.
Good question. I mean, in terms of favorite racetracks, it's tough to beat Spa. That's, I guess, going to be a relatively typical answer. One racetrack which your listeners probably aren't very familiar with, but should definitely check out. There's a racetrack in England called Thruxton, which is Thruxton, and that's the fastest track in Europe. It's old school fast and just a ton of fun. So either of those two would be my favorites. In terms of a track I haven't driven before, tough one. I'm trying to rack my brains here, trying to think what I haven't driven. Maybe like somewhere like Suzuka or Mount Fuji. Haven't driven either of those. But other than that, I think I've driven most places. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, I know. I looked at.
Actually, I've got one. I've got one. Bathurst.
Oh, good one, especially with it taking place this weekend. And as of this recording, there's been a ton of carnage just through qualifying. So I'm curious to see how the race is going to be later today.
Yeah, I've been keeping tabs on what's going on, and looks a bit of a mess out there. But they're all professionals; they'll figure it out come the race.
Yeah. So again, Kyle, thanks for joining me this morning. This episode will continue after a brief pause with another interview and more Rolex recap. Guys, thanks for listening, and Kyle, thanks for joining. Good luck the rest of the 2020 IMSA season.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks. Part 2 of the Rolex 24 recap. I am here now with Bryan Sellers. Bryan won the GTD class with Paul Miller Racing in the Lamborghini. Bryan, first off, thank you for joining me. Congratulations. What does it feel like to win a Rolex 24?
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me. It's pretty surreal. I mean, I'm sure, that's the same answer you've gotten from a lot of the guys, but you still get these moments where, usually I wear a Garmin, running watch, and you look at the Rolex on your wrist. It's a little bit of a shock. But man, it's so incredible. It just, you absolutely can't put it into words. It's something that I think we all aspire to get and dream about, and then to actually see it happen and be a part of it is so amazing. Like there's two parts to it. You always want to be the guy that's in the car and finishing the race and, be the one that crosses the start finish. But, this time it was Andrea Calderali, one of our co-drivers who did it. But what I did get to see was, the pit stand and how excited all the crew guys were, all the families that were there to be a part of it. And, that was pretty special also.
Yeah, it was really cool to see walking down pit lane. I think we were behind Dragon Speed when the end happened, so it was pretty cool to see everybody celebrating. I asked this question at the first part of this episode with Kyle Tilley, but after a 24-hour race, I'm sure you do some celebrating, go out to dinner or whatever. Is it a long celebration, or is it wow, I was essentially just up for 24 hours. I'm going to pass out after one glass of champagne?
It can be both. I'm getting a little bit older, so those wind down a little bit if they don't have to be existent. But actually, for me, it was a pretty tame one. We were staying at the track, my wife and I, and Madison Snow, who was in the car with me. And so Madison and his girlfriend and me and my wife, we just sat down and we ordered some pizza and had some beers and and just kind of sat and laughed and went to bed pretty early.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm a little jealous because I don't think I got back to Philadelphia until about 3 a.m. My nap was in the Orlando airport with a bunch of screaming kids in Disney gear.
It's the happiest place on the planet, they say.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't apply to the airport because that was a really miserable experience. And I know Jess, who joined me in Disney, isn't on the call this morning, but I know it took her about an hour and 20 minutes just to get through security at the airport.
Oh, gosh. That's awful.
Not as fun of an ending as you guys, but speaking of Madison Snow, this question actually comes from one of our Team Pit Lane members, Michael Goodyear. He asks, you've won Sebring, you've won the GTD championship driving with Madison Snow. Back in 2018. This was your first race back together after not being together in 2019. So first part of the question is, how do the dynamics of a successful driver pairing change when you're doing an endurance race with two additional drivers? And then part two is it good to have Madison back on your team?
Well, it's actually a really good question because it is extremely different when you have 4 drivers versus your 2. More personalities into the mix that obviously weren't there before. But I think that's one of the things that made this race special for us, is that this was the first time that the 4 of us, Corey, Madison, Andrea, and myself, had actually been together. We had all been together on combinations, but never as a full package. And so it is so important that you get that right continuity and that you get along and you understand what each person needs out of the program and you find a way to make that work. And I think that's one of the things that was different for us this time, is it kind of all clicked and we had a good time. And there was no ego. Everyone kind of knew their role in the situation. So, normally it is hard with 4 guys, but this time it was actually the easiest I think I've had it be. And you're not saying that to be cliche, but I think it has to be that way to win the race. And, as far as when you're in those situations, you still do default to your guy, your full-time driver, and understand that, if you have a struggle or you need something, that guy understands you probably better than the others, and that he's there, he's there for you, whatever. Having that fallback or safety net, I guess, is priceless. So, needless to say, for me, it's incredible to have him back. I think it was clearly in everyone's eyes a mistake that he couldn't last year. But that's, for me, water under the bridge, and he is back now. And I think the whole program is better because of it.
I think I would agree with that. So in 2020, can you guys and Paul Miller Racing compete for a GTD championship, do you think? I
think we can compete. I definitely think we can. There is no doubt that this is the most stacked that I've seen GTD. It's the thickest field, some of the best driver pairings I think I've ever witnessed. So without a doubt, it's going to be difficult. And I think that person that wins the championship this year will be the one that doesn't slip up. And that's hard to do over the course of a season. So I think I think it will obviously be a huge, huge challenge, to say the least. But I think we can. I think at this stage we have the opportunities. We have a great program, and I think we'll just go after it. I mean, one of the things that we always talk about internally is that we don't really worry about the results. And you got asked a couple of questions over the Daytona weekend about, hey, how do you prepare to win the race? But for us, it's never really about preparing to win the race. About preparing, doing the best we can when the guys are home at the shop, when we're at the track, working with the engineers the best way. And so I think as long as we go about it that way, then hopefully in the end, we'll have a chance.
I like it. So you speak of preparation. That's kind of leads right into my next question here. How do you prepare for a 24-hour race, both physically and mentally? And then during the race, how do you stay mentally sharp and not let the exhaustion set in?
It's hard. It's very hard. I think personally, the mental exhaustion is much more than the physical. To be honest, I mean, when you get in at Daytona, it's not a particularly physically demanding track, so you can do a lot of drive time. But it's the wearing down of your mind, I think, that is certainly hard. Being up late, getting up early for your stints, getting in the middle of the night to do a triple so that, people can get the right amount of rest, and then waking up knowing you got to go in again. That definitely wears you down. I think one of the things for me, you kind of go about your normal routine in the off season. You run, you train, you do whatever it is you do. But one of the things that I've had to really work on as I've gotten older and further into it is when you're done in the car, shutting off. And I mean literally shutting off, being done and walking away, understanding that your job is done, whether it was a good stint or a bad stint, your job's done. And watching, what the other guys are doing, watching their lap time, seeing if they're fast, seeing if they're moving forward, seeing if they're moving back, it's just super counterproductive, And so, like as a driver, it's one of the hardest things to do is just walk away. You want to know everything. So it's taken me a lot of years to get that right. And I think that, that's a key element to a 24-hour race.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that most people don't think about is watching what your other drivers are doing. I didn't think of that before. That's a really interesting look into what a driver goes through for a 24-hour race. So 2 more questions here, Bryan. Again, thanks for joining me this morning. Looking back in, I think it was 2002, you won the USF 2000 championship and then had a short stint in Formula Atlantic. So I think the next year, how did the Junior Series open wheel help you shape your sports car career and many years of sports car success?
The main thing for me was I actually think it's kind of two-sided. I think I'm probably much better in a sports car than I was car, number one. So for me, it was like getting into the right environments was a big thing. And I really loved sports car racing from the beginning. I have to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of it or follow it before I was actually in it because I was young and I wanted to do IndyCar or Champ Car. That's where my main focus was. But when I came on, I was immediately paired with Marino Franchitti, and it's like impossible not to fall in love with that guy and understand what sports car racing is all about, And then, you just paired with these great guys over the years, Wolf Hensler, Madison Snow, and on. So, but I think, what open wheel did for me is it made me, I think, technically savvy because it was something I was always interested in, really liked the engineering side of it, working with the engineers, understanding the dynamics of the car, how to make the car better so you could be, it was always like a main goal for me. In the open wheel stuff at the time, it was just rampant with people spending money and testing and development. So we got to do a lot of that stuff, like a lot of damper work, a lot of aerodynamic mapping and a lot of work with the floors of the cars. And so, you just get this wide diff work, you get this wide range of things that basically you would never have without that, the experience and the technical side of it. And so for me, that was huge moving forward in all of it.
I love it. So I'll wrap it up with one much easier question here. The last 2 Rolex 24s have kind of had a couple extremes where 2019 had the crazy long rain delay and rain. This year we had an 8-hour green flag stint. if you had to pick an 8-hour green flag stint or a lengthy rain delay where maybe you can calm down a little bit, which one are you taking?
Always flag racing. Always the green flag racing. I think it's like, I love it mostly for the fans. I mean, they didn't come to watch us sit under yellow. They came to watch cars rip around the racetrack and see people, battle all through the night. And that's what we came to do too. And I love the fact that the race.
Yeah, it was, I think 240 something laps of green flag there overnight, which was amazing to watch at all hours. And I really enjoyed covering my first Rolex 24. So Bryan, thanks very much for joining me, man. I appreciate it. Congrats on the win and best of luck throughout the 2020 season.
My pleasure, man. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. And Jess and I are back to recap the Rolex 24. I hope everybody enjoyed listening to Kyle Tilley and Bryan Sellers, both fantastic interviews. Again, Bryan won his class in the GTD with Paul Miller Racing. Kyle Tilley was third in the LMP2 category with Era Motorsport. This was Era's first ever LMP2 race, so super impressive. Real quick, I'll just go through a couple highlights. The Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac won overall and won the DPI class. Dragon Speed won the LMP2 class. BMW Team Ray Hall, the 24 car, won the GTLM, and Bryan Sellers and Paul Miller Racing won the GTD. So with that being said, Jess, what did you think about the event overall, covering it for the first time?
It was a lot. We kind of expected that going into it, but I mean, it was just constant information coming in to us and, just constant fans being around. It was so much fun, but it was so much more than I expected. So looking forward to next year, though, for sure, gonna go in with a little bit different plan, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I really didn't know what to expect. I don't think it helped that I was sick the night before and got home from the emergency room at midnight. So I got all of 45 minutes of sleep, which is not a good way to start a 24-hour event weekend. But it was, yeah, like you said, it was a lot of fun. It was really cool. I think I went through 3 sets of batteries on my radio throughout the race, which I didn't expect it, but I hope everybody enjoyed the larger amount of in-race coverage we did, which was a lot of fun. But I think next year we will definitely plan better, at least so I don't have to sleep in a media center chair. Maybe we can rent a camper like we thought, so I can at least get off my feet for a little bit. But again, still be at the track to listen and post stuff if need be. So Jess, your thoughts on the actual race itself?
Very good race. I think it was either 5 or 6 times, I can't remember previously. And I don't think I've ever seen a cleaner race than this one. Obviously, we had a few incidents, but nothing too crazy. Also, don't think I've ever seen the rumble strips get torn up like that. So that was an interesting thing to happen. I don't know, was that 4 hours in or so? So yeah, it was a great race. I very much enjoyed it, and I cannot wait until next year.
Yeah, I didn't know that they were just, the rumble strips were just put on with a drill or whatever, screwdriver, who knows. So that being said, going into the weekend versus the end of the weekend, how did your expectations change for the race? What do you think of it, from the media side of things, not from the actual race side of things?
So I think that the extremely long green flag period kind of changed the way we focused on things, because honestly, there toward the end, it was like, okay, something's got to give. Like, we need something to give us like a little break almost. So I think that was probably the biggest thing during the race that actually kind of changed the way that I personally was looking at things. I don't know if you guys all followed my personal account, but Mike was posting the whole time from the Pit Lane Parlay account, and he was doing all race stuff while I was doing all of the background, kind of what we were actually physically going through to cover it for you guys. So I think that there toward the end of that green flag period, we were both almost delirious.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention my thoughts on the race itself. I enjoyed the race. The green flag stint, like you just mentioned, was grueling, probably more so for the drivers than us, obviously. But it was still, after 4 or 5 hours of green flag, you're like, oh my God, this is intense. It's an entire IndyCar race, then some, without a yellow flag, and there's still at that point 12 hours of racing left or so. So yeah, I think as the weekend went on and we did more and more coverage, my expectations grew to, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Okay, I need a nap now. And I think I made it past the green flag or the yellow flag after the long green flag stint. And then I ran out of steam at 5 a.m. and, took my little media center nap, which you thankfully posted on social media for everybody to see. So, something kind of funny that happened multiple times throughout the weekend was the media center ran out of coffee. I think the first time was at the start of the race or before the race, and then again at 2 a.m. How worried were you about the lack of coffee available in the media center?
Yeah, so like you said, roughly 2 a.m., we walked in to get a cup of coffee, see if there was anything to snack on. And I stood there with my cup and 3 times tried to get coffee out of the machine, thinking that maybe I was just doing it wrong because it's 2 a.m. and I can't think anymore. And then I turned and looked, and the lady who was working was just smiling at me. And at that point, I wanted to pick up the coffee pot and throw it because, yeah, I was more than a little worried. I didn't know if we would be able to do it at that point. No coffee at 2 a.m. with still 12 hours to go, almost 12 hours to go, was shocker is the best word I can think of.
Yeah, it was scary, especially because by midnight I thought, well, I'm not going to make it much longer before I need to take a break. Obviously, I got a second wind with that coffee that finally did show up and made it till 5 a.m. So it was very scary, although I didn't consume as much coffee as I definitely expected for a 24-hour race. I'll wrap it up here with one final experience type question here as we continue on the Rolex 24 experience from everybody's standpoint. What would you change about how we covered the event, or what would you want to do differently for next year?
So next year, I think we have already started planning. So I think that was probably the only thing that we didn't do well. And that was because it was kind of a last minute sort of decision to end up going to this race and covering it. So I'm actually really looking forward to next year, I think more than I was for this year, because we will have a plan in place. And I definitely plan on bringing you more of the experience side of things, plan on more pictures, videos. You can just expect the whole shebang for the whole 24 hours, watching us be completely delirious.
Yeah, I agree. As the race went on and I was tweeting out more and more stuff that I was hearing on the radio and giving everybody that kind of inside look at what was going on, I really enjoyed it. It was fun running to various garages at all hours of the night, as the one Corvette had some sort of engine trouble. One of the Aimvasser Lexuses had some sort of problem overnight. At this point, I don't even remember what I was looking at because I was tired, but it was really fun. And big thank you to the Daytona squad for allowing us to cover the event. I know we'll be doing it again next year. So that wraps up our Rolex experience. I hope everybody enjoyed the interviews and a quick little look into what we thought of the event and how it was. And if you want to see anything from us next year coverage-wise, please send us a message. We'll be glad to incorporate that into the coverage. And obviously by this time next year, we'll have all the video stuff up and running too for even more. So you can watch me and sleep and pass out in the media center when everybody else is still working around me, sort of like our buddy Wolfgang did in the other room, which was hilarious.
It was classic, and you really can't say a whole lot because you did the same thing.
Oh, I know. I'm okay with that. You just have to relax and realize that you have nowhere to go and call it a night. And that 90 minutes really helped. I think it got me through the day, at least until we were driving back to the airport. Then I was really struggling.
See, I felt like the 90 minutes in the car, the nap I took, it actually made things worse for me. I'm one of those people who needs like a solid 2-3 hours to feel better. So, I was struggling after my nap, but next year we will plan ahead and maybe won't be quite as tired starting our day. So then the rest of the time will go much easier.
Yeah. Well, with that, we will wrap this up. Hope everybody enjoyed it again. Thank you for listening. And Jess, go ahead and sign us off.
And guys, keep your lug nuts tight.